thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight we want to discuss caring for yourself and for the aging and elderly in your life. I'm Patricia Bateau, Ministry Lead for the Alzheimer's Ministry here at New Faith Church. Joining me tonight is Leah Stanley. Leah is a caregiver, an author, and a speaker, and she also volunteers for the Care Partners organization, of which New Faith Church is in partnership with through a program called The Gathering Place in auspices of our Alzheimer's ministry, where caregivers have an opportunity to bring their loved ones to us once a month so that they can have a few minutes of rest away from their daily caregiving responsibilities. So welcome, Leah.
Thank you so much, Pat.
In addition, we'll hear from Dr. Kristin C. Jones, MD. She is an assistant professor at Baylor College of Medicine and a geriatric psychiatrist. She will be discussing brain health and sharing information to assist caregivers to understand Alzheimer's and dementia. So let's get started. Leah, can you tell me about your journey as a caregiver? How did you become a caregiver?
Well, I was dropped into the middle of it without realizing what was coming because I was 29 years old. I was a bride of 8 months, and all of a sudden, my biological father's parents, my grandparents, to whom I was very, very close, suddenly they needed my help. My biological father had left years before, so they had orchestrated all of their documents to reflect that I would be their caregiver. I had copies of the documents. I didn't know what they meant, and I was seeing my grandparents, starting to sort of repeat and sort of, we've been down this road before. Why are you telling me this again? Again, I was young, I was inexperienced, and I had no idea what I was looking at. And suddenly, they got in the car. They were gone 4 days. They were found 2 hours from home on the side of the road. The part of the car on the passenger side was wrecked, and it was below freezing temperatures. It was unbelievable. When it fell out, it really fell apart. So, welcome to it.
Yeah, it was frightening, I'm sure.
Yes.
What strategies would you offer those who are taking care of a person with Alzheimer's or dementia? How can they relieve their stress?
This is huge. Again, I was so ignorant. I had no idea what I was about to get into. And I found out firsthand, I found out really quick. This was a full-time plus job. Full-time is 40 hours a week. Then there's that plus part because it didn't end at 5 o'clock. It didn't end in the overnight hours. It went on and on and on, all day, all night. And even though I was in a position where I wound up having to put my grandparents in a nursing home, that was really the best option we had because I was dealing with it in stereo. That's what I always tell people. It's like, it's bad enough when you've got one. I had both because my grandmother had Alzheimer's specifically. My grandfather was an unspecified dementia. So I had two people I was trying to navigate with, and I wore out pretty quick. I saw pretty quick, I can't do this alone. So I always tell people, one thing you want to do is make sure you get a short-term mindset. What I mean by that is don't try to plan next month or 6 months. You need to plan today. Plan possibly just this morning. What can I get done this morning? Okay, now what can I get done this afternoon? This gives you a sense of accomplishment that you're getting things done, but it keeps you from being crazy. These diseases, all of the dementias, Alzheimer's is one of the dementias. There are several hundred different types. These things, it's a fluid situation. It changes. Sometimes the change is quick. Sometimes the change is slow, but the needle seems to always be moving. And you have to be prepared for that. And if you're trying to deal with it all the time, 24/7, you're going to go crazy quick. You won't be able to do it. It will wear you out. So I always recommend short-term mindset. Remember, too, you don't want to argue with them. I've seen people get into it and just be so upset. I was one of those people, so I can speak from experience. You think, well, I'm just going to reason with them. And then when reasoning doesn't work, you get upset, and then they get upset, and then next thing you know, you've got this clash going on. The problem is it's not the person. the person is not being deliberately difficult or belligerent. It is the disease talking. And it took me a long time to really absorb that. Once you get a hold of that, it makes working with them a little bit easier. You stop trying to reason. You stop trying to explain everything. That helped a lot. But I always tell people, it's just, man, this is a one day at a time thing. This is like I said, it may even be hour to hour, depending on what's going on, because moods will shift. There is so much that goes on with this, and it's people that have never dealt with it really have no idea. People joke about it. You'll hear somebody say that their Alzheimer's is acting up, and I'm looking at them going, please don't joke like that. You have no idea how serious this matter is and how upsetting this is to the family around them. It's so sad when you see the memories are gone. They just don't know. So frequent breaks. Caregivers are going to have frequent breaks. And when people offer to help, I talk to folks. I've had people come up to me, and they want to tell me their story, and I always want to hear it because everybody's story is unique. But they will look at me and they'll say, I just never get away. I just can't. And I look at them and say, do you have anybody that says, is there anything I can do to help? And then they say, oh, yeah, I've had people do that. And I say, then you let them take advantage of any opportunity. If someone's there and willing to say, hey, I've got a couple of hours. Can I help you this afternoon? You sure can. Can you stay with my loved one? Let me go get a cup of coffee. Let me run to the post office. Let me get some of these things done. It's an all-encompassing thing. It's huge. It's enormous. It's not even. It's kind of like the stay-at-home mom, and I've been that too. I was a stay-at-home mom when my kids were younger, and it's 24/7. You're always on duty.
Yeah. Well, we try to encourage in the gathering place. We try to encourage the caregiver to allow themselves that break by bringing their loved one. Many times it's they don't want to get up, take the time to get them dressed, and so it's easier for them to just stay at home with them and say, well, that's okay. No, you don't need to come. We can't bring her today. We know that time and stress management are linked. What tips or tools would you suggest one use to help a caregiver manage their time?
As I mentioned, it's a fluid situation. So since you know that it's going to possibly change, the mood may be fantastic this morning, this afternoon it may not be fantastic. I've seen that happen. You have to be flexible. But at the same time, you have to make some plans. You have to say, okay, we are going to go to the gathering place today, or we do have a doctor's appointment that we're going to go to, or I need to go to the grocery. So make your plans, be flexible, and work with the situation as it presents itself. Sometimes that can be the best advice, is because, I wish I could, I love the organization of step 1, step 2, step 3. I love that. I wish God would tell us his plans ahead of time on, so many things. If I just knew I could do this. And I tell people, you have to kind of walk this road by faith, just like you do your walk with Jesus. You have to walk by faith. And you have to go on faith going, all right, today we're going to get this done. And then if something occurs that you can't, let it go. Don't get so wound up, because the only person you're going to make crazy is yourself. But good time management skills, studies show that this absolutely reduces stress over time. You may not feel it today or tomorrow, but if you can manage the hours of your day, it really can reduce your stress a lot.
Okay, thank you for that. Often those who need care have financial matters that need to be cared for as well. Can you talk about some types of documents that they may need, such as a power of attorney or a medical power of attorney? How do you go about initiating those documents?
This is crucial. This is the backbone of caregiving. If you don't have the proper documents in place, it's going to seriously compromise your ability to care for your loved one, because physicians can't, won't, it depends on who you get. They won't take you seriously. They won't listen to you. I was point blank told that if I had not had the proper documents, they would not be able to help my grandparents. So I always tell people, if you go to an attorney, there is a buffet of documents that you can get, and they're all good. They're all valid. They're all important. But there are some must-haves without which you are going to be compromised. One of those documents is the durable power of attorney. Many people don't understand what power of attorney is. Power of attorney means you signed a document where you gave this person over here of your choosing power to make decisions for you. They can sign documents, they can transact business in your name, and it's the person you chose. The word durable is really important for the caregiver. Durable means should you become incapacitated, the document will stand. You will still be able, your person that you gave power of attorney to will still be able to function for you, even though you may be having cognitive issues. That's a must-have document. Another document that I tell people is the medical power of attorney. Back in the old days, it was like a one-stop shop. When I had power of attorney for my grandparents, it was that document enforced me to do everything. We don't do it that way anymore. Today, they will separate out the different components. So you have power of attorney for business and maybe financial power of attorney, things like that. But then there's a medical power of attorney. The medical power of attorney is exactly what it sounds like. It's so you can have the authority to make medical decisions for your loved one, or you've signed the document to give this person over here the authority to act in your name. They can decide for you that you might need a medical test that will help you. They can sign documents to upgrade your care, make sure if you need assisted living, or if you do have to have like a full-time therapist or something, nursing home. The person with medical power of attorney can make those choices. So that's also a very crucial document. Another document people hear about is the advance directive. It's also called a living will. It's essentially the same document. What it does is it gives you the power to say what you want done. So that if something were to occur and if you were to stop breathing or your heart were to stop beating, do you want to be resuscitated? The advance directive, the living will, this is where you tell your family and your physicians what your wishes are. Because I've been in that situation where as the caregiver, I was called in the middle of the night and it's like, okay, well, this is what we're doing. And I'm like, no, that is not what we're doing, because I knew the wishes of the person involved. I knew what they wanted. That's crucial, because if you are hit with information and it sounds like life and death, you don't want to sit there and have angst over, what do I do? What would they want? With the advance directive, you know what they want, and it takes the sting out of it, and that's very helpful.
Yeah.
I always tell people, a lot of times I've had folks say that the cost of going to see an attorney is, alarming, and they feel like, well, I just can't do it because, there's no money to do it with or whatever. I always say this: do an internet search. Look for free legal aid. There are a shocking number of attorneys that will do pro bono work, meaning they won't charge for it. Also, if you're in a city with a law school, look at the law school. Sometimes they will have workshops for their students. They'll have third-year law students, or they'll have graduates who are waiting to take the bar exam, and they get practice by drafting these documents. The documents are then reviewed by a board-certified attorney, and it's just a win-win for everybody. It can be done at no cost or very, very low cost, and that way you're covered. You get those documents. They're crucial.
So is it necessary for those documents to become legal through an attorney? Can, having worked in a hospital, social workers, when they ask, do you have advance directives or whatever, is it necessary for maybe a notary to sign your wishes for that?
I tell people, definitely, if you're going to, and you can go online, you can print off the documents. I definitely recommend getting a notary. You will want witnesses to your signature. You will want all of these things in place, because you don't want, it sounds ridiculous to say it like this, you don't want any static when the moment of a situation has arisen comes. You don't want there to be anything that would be like, well, this isn't going to work because. So I advise definitely get a notary, but I would definitely do the due diligence and the research before you get a herd of documents that you may or may not actually need, and understand what each one does.
Okay. Thank you. Now, I know the subject of getting our affairs together, when someone or a physician may say, get your affairs together, that's not a pleasant conversation for many individuals, but it is a necessary conversation in some instances. So when would you suggest a family have that conversation, and how do you suggest they start it?
I recommend as soon as possible. I always tell folks, do not wait, because you do not know. We had a situation, when my mother passed away, I was on the phone with her the night before. Everything was fine. The next day, less than 24 hours later, she was gone. And it was one of those things, again, if I had not been prepared as far as the documentation and all of the knowing what to do and what decisions to make, I would have been up a creek. So I tell people, by all means, do this as quickly as possible. I had one lady tell me the idea of giving someone power of attorney over herself just scared her to death. She said, that's a lot of power to give somebody over myself. I don't know that I want to do that. And I said to her, would you rather pick the person that will make that decision for you, or would you rather someone behind a desk who's never met you make that decision about what's going to happen to you? I said, it really is your choice. And when you do the documentation ahead of time, you get to make that choice. If you don't, you're leaving it to someone else to decide what will happen. And I don't think anybody wants that.
Yeah. And had you made those arrangements with your mom before she became Alzheimer's or dementia? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And I was so glad I had. I cannot tell you what a blessing that was, truly.
Yeah, that helps. Finally, what type of community resources do you have that are available to support a family that is new, having a person that with dementia or Alzheimer's in the family, or those families that currently are in the process of providing care?
Well, as you mentioned, the gathering place that Care Partners Texas puts together, oh my gosh, what a valuable resource. There's something fabulous about being able to talk to other people who are going through a similar experience. As I said, everyone's journey with dementia will be different, but it is such a blessing to find out, oh, wait, oh, you've had this too. Oh, really? Well, tell me, what did you do about it, or how do you cope with it? There is such a blessing in that. So I tell people, by all means, use support groups, utilize your church family. A lot of churches, you are in charge of a ministry that deals with this exact situation. I think that's fantastic. I wish every church had this because there's so much of it. Something else I always tell people about is a group called All's Authors. It's a website called allsauthors.com. It is more than 250 people who have written books about their personal stories. I am one of the All's Authors. My book is available at allsauthors.com. You can look for the book you want, click on it, you can read all about it, and then if you think, oh, I want to get this book, click it, and it will take you to the author's Amazon page, and you can order the book right there. But what All's Authors did is they was sort of a one-stop shop. They have people who've written about caring for a spouse, caring for a parent, caring for a grandparent. We have some that are written for children, young children, to help them understand what's happening to grandmother or aunt or uncle or whoever may have dementia. But it is a fantastic outreach, and there are more than 250 of them. So definitely something to look at.
Okay, and that is called allauthors.com.
All's Authors, right. ALZAUTHORS.com.
Okay.
Great resource.
That's great information to know. I know that Care Partners also has a resource called Common Ground, which is a support group during this time of pandemic. Since no one can get together, they are doing Common Ground, a support group, virtually. So that's a great resource also.
Excellent,
An
yes.
immediate resource that people can have. Now let's listen to Dr. Kristin Jones. As a geriatric psychiatrist, she has a unique perspective.
My name is Dr. Kristin C. Jones. I'm a double-boarded adult and geriatric psychiatrist working in academic medicine here in the Houston area. I'm here to discuss with you a little bit about Alzheimer's disease and dementia, otherwise known as dementia caused by Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease and dementia affects a lot of individuals in our community, whether loved ones, family members, or friends, as well as individuals might be affected by symptoms of Alzheimer's disease or dementia. So I'm just going to answer some common questions that individuals might have about Alzheimer's disease, signs and symptoms, and especially for caregivers, things that they can do to help their loved ones who might be suffering from this disease. So first question is the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease. The first thing to know is that dementia is not a single disease. It's an overall term, kind of like you might say heart disease covers a broad range of medical conditions. So dementia covers a broad range of medical conditions, Alzheimer's disease being one of them, and Alzheimer's disease being the most common cause of dementia. Dementia are disorders that cause abnormal brain changes. These changes in the brain typically occur a couple of decades before you actually even see symptoms. So up to even 2 or more decades before you start to see symptoms of dementia, you already have had changes in your brain, pathological changes that are triggering the decline in thinking or cognitive abilities. And this decline in cognitive or thinking abilities can be severe enough to impair activities of daily life and independent function. They can also affect behavior, emotions, mood, and even cause perceptual disturbances. Alzheimer's disease, like I said, is the most common cause of dementia, up to 60 to 80% of cases. There are other types of dementia. Second most common type of dementia is actually vascular dementia. This is microscopic bleeding and blood vessel blockages in the brain that also cause dementia. And then there's individuals who can experience both type of pathologies or causes for dementia. And actually vascular dementia and Alzheimer's dementia often co-occur. So individuals who have multiple causes of dementia might be termed as having mixed dementia or dementia caused by multiple factors or diseases such as Alzheimer's disease or vascular disease. There's also many other conditions that can cause dementia. Some may sound familiar to you. Parkinson's dementia, so Parkinson's disease can lead to dementia. Lewy body dementia, frontal temporal dementia. There's even dementias that are caused by alcohol use, alcohol-induced dementia. So there's a lot of different causes for dementia. So just to understand that when somebody has a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, it's meaning that they have dementia caused by the disease known as Alzheimer's. So signs of dementia can vary greatly between individuals. We often think of memory problems, but problems in short-term memory is just one symptom. Can be other aspects like keeping track of your purse or wallet, being able to organize and plan to pay bills, to go grocery shopping, planning and preparing meals, remembering appointments, being able to travel outside of the neighborhood and not get lost, things such as that. And with dementia, it's something that's progressive, which means that the signs of dementia start out slowly, but they gradually get worse over time. So you want to, if you yourself or you know somebody or a loved one who's suffering from these thinking changes, these signs and symptoms of dementia, you want them to get to a doctor to be evaluated as soon as possible. Sometimes professional evaluation can find what we call reversible or treatable cause of dementia, meaning patient really doesn't have dementia. They may have a treatable underlying condition that looks like dementia, And if you treat it, their symptoms go away. Sometimes this could be due to thyroid abnormalities or vitamin mineral deficiencies. And you want to be able to differentiate what's reversible, what's kind of mimicking dementia but really isn't. Also, severe depression, if it's not treated, can look like dementia, but that's reversible. You treat the depression, the cognitive and concentration and those sort of symptoms can go away. From those non-reversible causes of dementia, like Alzheimer's disease or vascular disease. Also, the earlier that you're able to seek help from a physician, the earlier you're able to get evaluated, the earlier that you can be included in maybe some medications that can maybe help improve function and maybe slow progression modestly. Of course, none of these medications are a cure. And also maybe be a part of some clinical trials. And most importantly, if you are diagnosed with Alzheimer's, the earlier you do seek treatment, the earlier you can start on future planning. So as we know, this disease does progress, dementia does progress. So the earlier we can start talking with our loved ones about what they would want to be put in place as they progress further along in their life, future planning for in-home care, care in a facility, end-of-life decisions, things like that. It's often hard to talk about, but this is the time you want to have open discussions versus waiting till it's too late to really know what that one individual would want done. So just a little bit switching gears, the next question is, what are some causes and risk factors for Alzheimer's disease? Again, Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause for dementia amongst a lot of other conditions that causes dementia, but we're just going to focus on Alzheimer's disease. So for Alzheimer's disease, researchers believe that there's not a single cause of Alzheimer's disease. It's likely multifactorial. So meaning genetics, heredity, environmental factors all play a role in contributing to the onset of Alzheimer's disease. And then there's definitely some specific factors that can increase the risk of Alzheimer's, while some factors can't be changed, such as your age, your family history, and heredity, as we mentioned before. So some factors that can be changed or modified, these are the things that you want to start working on early. So I'm not talking necessarily to just individuals who now have symptoms of Alzheimer's, but people like you and me who are our age, who are middle-aged in our 30s and 40s. This is where the pathology for Alzheimer's starts, before you even start to see symptoms. So this is where you want to be working on those modifiable risk factors. So one of them is head injuries. There is a link between head injuries and the future risk of dementia. So you want to protect your brain. You want to buckle up, wear your seatbelt. You want to wear a helmet when you're participating in sports. You want to make sure that you're fall-proofing your home as much as possible. Another important modifiable risk factor, especially in our community, is the heart-head connection. Some of our strongest evidence links brain health to heart health. And the connection makes sense. Our brain is nourished by one of the richest blood vasculature systems in our body, and our heart is pumping to that vasculature. So any insults to the blood vessels, these microscopic and even macroscopic or very tiny or very big blood vessels in the brain, can lead to brain damage, like stroke, or we call ischemic changes, where there's lots of blockage in those very tiny blood vessels in the brain. And this can lead to brain damage and loss of brain cells that is not reversible. So when we talk about heart-brain connection, we want to address those vascular risk factors. Again, vascular dementia, Alzheimer's dementia, they're often co-occur. So I like to think of it this way: whatever could affect your heart, you want to treat and you want to try to modify, because it can also affect your brain. And if it's affecting your brain, that puts you at risk for developing dementia like Alzheimer's or even vascular dementia. So some conditions we want to try to treat and keep under check, generally heart disease, diabetes, stroke, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. And this goes back to having regular appointments with your physician, working with them to make sure you're on the right medications, you're on the right diet, you're exercising regularly so that you can decrease those vascular risk factors, because that does increase your risk of developing dementia later on, whether it's Alzheimer's dementia or it's from vascular causes. And even studies in the brain have shown that the pathological changes, so the changes in the brain tissue that occur decades before you see symptoms in Alzheimer's disease, are linked to patients who have stroke or have damage to those blood vessels in the brain. So having strokes, having damage to those blood vessels in the brain because you have high cholesterol, you have poorly controlled diabetes, you have hypertension, can lead to some more of those changes that cause Alzheimer's disease. So there is a link there. So overall, the idea is if you want to protect your brain, do things to protect your heart, and you'll be protecting your brain as well. And in general, a modifiable risk factor is overall healthy aging. So again, it sounds cliche, but it really is that simple. It goes back to healthy diet, so eating healthy things, avoiding high fat foods, avoiding high levels of carbs and processed sugar, maintaining a healthy weight, getting regular exercise. These are so important, not only for diabetes, not only for high blood pressure, not only so that you look and feel great, but it actually protects your brain as well. So that's why it's so important. Avoiding excess alcohol. So there are things called alcohol-induced dementia. So years of heavy alcohol use or excessive alcohol use, not only will it affect your heart, not only will it affect your liver, but it can also affect your brain. So there are some other things to be aware of. And again, exercising, not only just exercising your body, but exercising your mind. And what we say by exercising our mind is that studies do show that individuals who have what we call a high cognitive reserve, meaning either they've taken on the lifestyle of lifelong learning, or they have careers where they're constantly learning and acclimating to new things, that they tend to fare a little bit better. That's a little bit protective from Alzheimer's, because your brain is able to make new connections between neurons. And so there's more reserve for your brain to function off of. Even if there is some pathology of Alzheimer's or vascular disease there, your brain has more of a reserve to go off of. So this can mean getting outside of the four walls of your house when we're able to get through the pandemic, learning new things, taking a class, learning a second language, reading new books, meet new people, take a life skills class or a lifelong learning class that's available online, interact with new people, just doing new things, learning new things, as well as that's kind of like exercise for your brain. Same thing with exercising your body. So all of those things can be protective for you. So one of the next common questions that we have in terms of dementia or Alzheimer's disease is some of the early signs and symptoms. One of the more common signs and symptoms is particularly in Alzheimer's disease is memory loss. And in addition, there's kind of some other warning signs that we want to see. And we say memory loss. So some people might say, they think my family member or my grandmother has Alzheimer's, but she remembers everything. Like, she remembers when I was 5 years old, and she remembers what happened that day perfectly. So we're talking about dementia, in particular Alzheimer's disease. We're not talking about forgetting memories from the past. The issue with memory is short-term memory, retaining and learning new things. So when that same family member is put in a new situation or given new information, they have trouble retaining it and then remembering it. So it's not memories from 30 years ago, it's memories from yesterday, from last week, from last month. Learning and remembering new numbers, new names, new places. That's where we're first going to see signs of memory loss, and it'll progress from there. So again, one of the first or most common signs of Alzheimer's disease is forgetting recently learned information. Like I said, dates, events, asking the same questions over and over, increasingly relying on memory aids, having to use notes or electronic devices, or even family members to kind of recall new information. Now, this is different from typical age-related changes. So sometimes as we get older, we might forget names or appointments, but we're able to kind of jog our memory and remember it later. So for a person who might have Alzheimer's disease, they're really not able to jog their memory on their own. Learning new things is difficult, and they often are having to rely on other people to recall those things. Another sign and symptom is changes in ability to develop and follow a plan or work with numbers. They might have difficulty executing a familiar recipe or tracking monthly bills, difficulty concentrating as they did before. And again, this would be different from somebody who has typical age-related changes, who might occasionally make errors when managing finances or household bills, but overall it's not a significant pattern and is not interfering overall with their function to still manage household bills or things like that. Patients with Alzheimer's disease, another sign is that they might find it hard to complete daily tasks. May have trouble driving to a familiar location, organizing a grocery list, or remembering their rules to a favorite game. Again, different from somebody who may just have age-related changes and maybe occasionally needs help setting the microwave or recording a program on a TV show. So again, something that's consistent, that's really interfering with day-to-day activity, more of a potential sign of Alzheimer's disease, versus something that's occasional, doesn't really interfere with overall ability to function independently of others. So number 4, another sign or symptom that we might see in Alzheimer's disease is losing track of dates, seasons, and the passage of time. Sometimes even forgetting where they are or how they got there. Again, this is separate from age-related changes where we might get confused about the day of the week or the specific date for that month. Thinking it's the 25th when it's actually the 26th, but then figuring it out on their own later, okay? So kind of the key thing is that, age-related changes, you might occasionally have some issues or some difficulties, but it's not interfering with your overall function, and you're able to kind of figure it out on your own at some point, either immediately or a little bit later. Some other causes that individuals might have difficulty with is following or joining a conversation. Individuals with Alzheimer's disease or dementia may stop in the middle of a conversation and have no idea how to continue. They might repeat themselves in conversation over and over. They may really struggle with vocabulary, kind of finding the right word, just evades them. And even having trouble naming a familiar object or use the wrong name. For example, instead of calling a watch, they may struggle figuring out the word watch, they might say something like hand clock or something like that. Again, different from typical age-related changes, where an individual might occasionally have trouble finding the right word, but it eventually comes to them. Another sign is that a person living with Alzheimer's disease may put things in unusual places. They may lose things and are unable to go back over their steps to figure out where they placed those items. And these individuals at times can often start to accuse loved ones or people living with them, or even other people, stealing items, especially as the disease progresses. And this is actually something I see commonly, because at this point, family members are now concerned and are bringing their family members in, where they probably should have brought them in much earlier before we got to this stage, where they're complaining that their loved one is paranoid, that they're thinking somebody's coming in and stealing their stuff. And it really goes back to an issue of memory, where they're not able to recall misplacing the item, where they put it. They're not able to go back and retrace their steps to figure out what they did with it. And so by default, sometimes it's the most logical assumption is that somebody's coming in and taking my items. And the most logical assumption is that the people who are maybe living with me, the people who are seeing me most often, where they're the ones who have access to it, so they must be stealing it. So those are some things that happen, especially as we progress into more middle stages of Alzheimer's disease. So we want to start being aware of these things before we get there, kind of in the early stages, where we might be able to start some treatments to try to slow the progression as much as we can. We can't stop the progression, but we might be able to do some things to slow it. Let's see, some other things that we might see, signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's disease and dementia, are changes in judgment or decision making. Maybe having poor judgment when it comes to dealing with money, or paying less attention to grooming or keeping themselves clean. This is commonly thought of as, the older individual who's losing thousands of dollars or how much ever money in excess of what they have to schemes or scams, where before they're very astute with their money, they're very wise, they're very judicious, and now they seem to be giving all their money away to these frivolous scams or things like that. So again, a person, typical age-related changes may make a bad decision once or twice, or may say neglect some things like changing the oil. But again, it's not going to impair their overall function. It's not going to significantly interfere with their daily life. And as we said before, kind of another sign or symptom is that patients living with Alzheimer's disease might have more difficulty holding conversations because of the changes in their ability to communicate, to understand communication, as well as to contribute communication. And as a result, they may start to withdraw from previously enjoyable activities, hobbies, social activities, or other engagements. And this is without necessarily feeling depressed, endorsing sadness, endorsing loss of interest. So we want to separate this from depression. And sometimes this can also be exhibited as apathy. So again, not depression, but this kind of loss of motivation that previously was there for individuals. Versus typical age-related changes where somebody just may not be interested, and this could be for several reasons, including depression, just may not be interested in the same family obligations or social obligations. Lastly, some of the signs and symptoms we want to see with Alzheimer's is that patients might experience changes in mood, personality, as well as perceptual changes. Patients can become confused, suspicious, as we talked about before, depressed, fearful, or anxious. They may become very easily upset. This could happen in the comfort of their home or when they're out with friends. Again, this is different from typical age-related changes where older individuals might have a very specific way of doing things, specific order to their life, and might become more irritable or testy when there's a disruption to their routine. One thing I like to caveat when we talk about dementia or any type of dementia, including Alzheimer's type, and older individuals and changes in mood, more commonly people think of psychiatric symptoms, is that the brain houses all of this. So mood changes, depression, anxiety, irritability, perceptual disturbances, hallucinations, paranoia, all of that is housed in the brain. The same organ that controls cognitive function as well. So whenever we have a dementia of any type, and we start to have loss of that brain tissue, because of the disease process starts to destroy some of the brain tissue, whether it's because of stroke, whether it's because of Alzheimer's disease, because of other pathology from other types of dementia. It also affects those parts of the brain that control emotion, that control mood, that control perception, that control sleep. So patients can present with a lot of these psychiatric symptoms that they've never had a history of before. So one of the common things that I might see when I get a consultation, say from a primary care doctor or ER or a hospital for an older patient who has new changes in their perception or their mood, is that this is typically an older patient, so somebody who's 65 and older usually, and had no prior psychiatric history whatsoever. But now we think that maybe this patient has schizophrenia because they're starting to hear and see things. My first thought is this patient likely does not have schizophrenia at age 65, new onset. This patient likely has something going on with the brain. And one thing I'm going to be looking for are these signs and symptoms of dementia that we talked about. Because this patient might have some underlying signs and symptoms of dementia that have been overlooked for some time. Or often what happens is that families kind of compensate for those changes in thinking for a couple of years. Then it progresses to the point where it starts to cause some maybe psychiatric or mood or perceptual disturbances. And then they bring that loved one in to be seen and evaluated. But these changes may have already been occurring a couple of years before, and now they're at a more middle stage or moderate severity of dementia. And of course, we want to rule out other causes for these changes as well. But that's always something in the back of my mind when we have an older adult, no prior psychiatric history. Now they're having onset of personality, behavior, and cognitive changes. I'm going to want to do a workup and really look to see, have there been any changes that have been affecting their brain? Dementia included, stroke included, as well as ruling out any type of medication, medical illness, or substance that could be contributing.
We thank you so much, Leah and Dr. Jones, for your time. One last question for you. We'd like to leave our caregivers with few words of encouragement. So if you could offer 1 to 2 pieces of advice, what would it be?
I encourage people to understand I went through this, so I've had the experience. This wasn't just something I heard someone talk about, but I actually experienced it myself. And what was paramount to me was my faith in Jesus as I went through it. And I tell people, we hear this scripture over and over again, but Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. I tell people these are not just words for me. People can argue what you think or your philosophy. Well, they can't argue your experience. And that's why I always tell people, I'm talking to you from my own experience. I cried out to God daily for wisdom. I had to have it. I knew I was not equal to the task on my own. And the beauty of it was, and I do write about this in my book, that God met us right where we were, and he navigated that path with us one step at a time. I never could see way down the road. It was always what I needed to do next. This is what has to come next.
Right.
I encourage caregivers, draw on your faith and look at what the Word of God says. I'm telling you, He will meet you there. He will not leave you alone.
Good night, and thank you for joining us for Friday Night Live.